Welcome back to It's Your Law. Mike Siddall and I are talking about our insurance law and how it changes. Now, over the years, some of it has been court-made. Much of it more recently has been legislatively made. And the legislature, of course, responds to who's in power, and who's in power responds to who subsidized the election. And we've got people trying to influence the legislators. And in the period of time that you and I have been practicing law, we had 30 years ago stacking. That is, if you bought 5 insurance policies, you actually bought 5 insurance policies, and you could collect under the policies that you bought. That got taken away by Republican legislation. We had some bouts with reducing clauses, taking away the benefits we purchased with underinsured motorists and uninsured motorists. The best way to protect the people in your car is to buy coverage. It's a good business for the insurance industry. They take a premium. But then, of course, legislation and the way policies were written with reducing clauses, you found out, as you discussed just a minute ago, you didn't get the $100,000 you bought. Your company took a premium for $100,000 but takes credit for the $50,000 the wrongdoer had, and that didn't seem to be fair. That and many other things were kind of turned around when Governor Doyle was in his last couple of months, slipped it in the budget bill, which many people didn't like, and I happen to be one of them, but we called that truth in automobile. So people actually got what they paid for to a point. It got back about 80% of what the Republicans had taken away earlier, increased the minimum coverages so that the person who runs into you on the road would have at least a significant amount of insurance. And now we've got the Walker group in, and they've pretty much reversed most of that. Explain your views on that, please, Mike.
Well, it's difficult to understand why it was reversed back. The cry was that the insurance was going to be so expensive that people couldn't afford it and it was going to hurt them economically, when the truth is, even after that went into effect, Wisconsin had the 4th lowest in auto insurance premiums of any state in the nation. The claims that that was the reason for it are just not founded on the facts. Here again, this is more legislation that just hurts the injured consumer, the victims of these accidents that now have limited coverage. We've all had in the last 2 years, between November of '09 and now, cases where our clients were able to get fairly compensated because they could stack policies of insurance of underinsured and uninsured motorist coverage. They had 3 medical pays of $10,000 each, which they could use to pay the medical bills. Now that's all going away again without any really good reason. They lowered the limits of liability that you have to have, although they kept mandatory insurance in effect. They lowered the limits to back down to $25,000, what they have been for decades in Wisconsin. It's just not realistic. And legislators, they point to the trial lawyers and say, you're greedy trial lawyers and this is why we're doing it. And they never once mention the injured victims of people that may have disabilities for the rest of their life, or the wrongful death of a spouse or a father or brother. So it's just not consumer-friendly legislation at all.
Well, of course, they use the excuse that they're saving people money, but the simple fact is responsible drivers already had more than the minimums, and now the minimums have been cut in half. What this really means that responsible drivers are going to spend more money. They're going to go to their insurance agent and say, I have to assume that the person who is in an accident with me has the minimum of $25,000, which wouldn't cover a weekend in ICU, and has the minimum med pay of $1,000 that wouldn't cover an hour in the emergency room if I take off my clothes. I have to assume that we've gone back 30 years in terms of the level of protection for my family on the other person's car. And in the meantime, medical costs have gone off 10 times. The cost of a car has gone up 5 times. It's absolutely crazy. It was a gift to the insurance industry and punishment for consumers, maybe under the guise of punishing trial lawyers who represent consumers. But just as many trial lawyers represent insurance companies. You're an example of that.
It's true. And then the pathetic thing is back even in '94 when they originally changed the law, and again this time in the legislative hearings, they were asked, the insurance company representatives, well, if you get this, are you going to reduce your premiums? You know, and the answer was no. So they don't reduce the premiums, but they're giving less coverage, and yet they get passed, and the consumers have to accept it.
And according to the records of American Family, for example, one of the more popular insurance companies in the state of Wisconsin that had its home office down there in Madison, they've just had another record-breaking profit year. The insurance industry is standing behind this kind of illusionary legislation, and they're bailing money at the expense of consumers. Consumers haven't had it this tough for 30 years, and the Walker administration, perhaps in response to contributions and perhaps because of philosophical concerns, has really rewarded the insurance industry, have rewarded big corporations, have rewarded the companies and the executives that are making millions of dollars a year at the expense of consumers.
Well, that's true, and they've never balanced it, you know, between the profits of the insurance company and the interests of the consumer. It's lopsided, way in favor of the insurance companies once again.
Well, now you've got Governor Walker's ear. I'm going to ask you, if you contact your friend Governor Walker and talk to him, that you probably agree with him on lots of things, like balancing the budget. I agree with him on that. But on this particular issue, he's really hurting the consumers to benefit the insurance companies, and it's not fair.
In fact, I did. 2 weeks ago, I wrote the governor a letter outlining my thoughts, and I sent copies of it to the leaders of both houses and hope they will take that into consideration, that there are conservatives who are against these types of laws. They're just anti-consumer, anti-victim laws, and they should be called that, and that should be brought to their attention because it's just simply not necessary.
And back to I'm sorry, I'm sure you're going to contact your Republican legislator, and I'm going to contact Dick Spanbauer, my legislator, who is one of the people signing onto the bill. And I'm going to say, what are you thinking? This isn't fair to the people who elected you, and it's not fair to anybody else. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
I'm glad you're on the show. Thanks very much, Mike.
All right, thank you, George.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.